Welcome to the Neurodivergent Parenting Podcast. I'm Melissa Cox and I will be your host. I'm here because, like you, I am trying to make sense of this beautiful mess of neurodivergent family life. Parenting is chaos with brief moments of order, but neurodivergent parenting is chaos on steroids. Each episode, we will sink into real conversations about this journey, not the Pinterest perfect version, but the real one, where we can share strategies that actually work for us, feel seen, heard, and build a community where we genuinely understand each other. So, whether you're listening while pacing your kitchen for the 10th time today, or finally sitting still after everyone else has gone to bed, you're in the right place. Let's figure this out together, one beautifully chaotic moment at a time.
I have a guest today who I'm going to let introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Emily. I am here just as a parent to two, three children, two who we know for sure are neurodivergent, and I am as well myself. And I'm also a clinical therapist. I keep feeling like that education should help me in this endeavor, and it typically does not. What I
Yeah.
do professionally is very different. You know, there are
Yeah.
professionals who are good at this stuff, but my focus is elsewhere. So that's just the short version of who I am. Also, um, have known you, Melissa, for a
hmm
while now, and really just enjoy everything that you're doing, and all the stuff that you put out into the world is really helpful to me. So I'm excited to
Thank
be here
you.
and be a small part of it today.
Thank you. I just really love knowing you. I think you're an awesome person, and
Oh,
I'm really glad that we get to talk today.
thank you so much.
So, I like to start with kind of an easier question. So, like, do you have any special interests right now or a favorite STEM that you like to use at the moment? Any?
Mm, yes, yes and no. My biggest thing right now has actually been getting outside and getting in the dirt.
Mm.
My family moved in, well, my children and I moved in January to 50 acres.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, um, I don't, it's certainly not, it's a hobby farm. It's certainly not
Yeah.
a working farm. We don't accomplish a lot, but getting out there, getting my hands in the dirt, my feet on the ground,
Yeah.
has been a big thing for me in the last few months.
That
Um,
sounds amazing, honestly.
yeah, I
I
love it.
also love grounding. I love just putting my bare feet in the dirt.
Yes. Oh, yeah. And some people think that's gross.
I mean, you're gonna wash them off. It's not like you're not gonna wash them
Right.
off later.
I think I just said that because I did not realize until I was maybe in my 30s that some people find that really odd. Um, but I grew up, I mean, my mother,
Yeah.
who has certainly not been diagnosed with anything ever because she's never set foot in a therapist's
Yeah.
office, is likely not typical. And
Yeah.
she loves to be outside with her bare feet. And it's just something that I'd always done.
It's so funny to me too, like the stark divide of neurodivergent people who either love getting their hands and feet dirty and like being in nature, and the
Yes.
people who are like, absolutely not. I'm not getting dirty. I'm not getting any kind of sensory ick on my hands or
Yeah.
my feet, and they don't want any part of it.
Right. That's funny. Yeah, that's funny. That's not something I guess I've thought a lot about, but it's very true because in my household, I think we are all of that variety. My daughter,
Yeah.
especially, and I are in large part different in our
Mm,
neurodiversity. But we do share that.
yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. I'm pretty much fine with most textures except with food. Like food is my
Oh,
texture issue. It's
oh, that,
like
yeah,
completely
I
different.
can't. I'm very, very particular. Again, it's so funny looking back, having come to these understandings about myself as an adult. looking back at the stuff that could have been obvious tells,
Oh
had
yeah.
the world known more about this at that time, but always been very particular about the texture of my food,
Hmm.
and still
Yeah,
today.
like I remember in childhood I was kind of picky about spicy stuff because I was just very sensitive to the taste, like things that were
Mhm.
not spicy were spicy to me, right?
Sure.
Because all flavors were kind of more intense for me. Um, but as I grew up, like it was more about the texture of it and the kind of spice. I don't know if that's I don't know. Some of us like we seek the sensory. It's I can be both seeking and avoidant in different
Hmm.
ways.
Hmm.
Um,
Oh yeah. Yeah. I can completely relate to that.
yeah. Do you
I
feel like you
find
have more of that in your household, like one or the other? More
um
seeking or
yes, yeah, absolutely. In terms of I go really a lot of things, and the older I get, I'm more avoidant.
mm,
There are sensory things that I like, as I talked about, getting outside in the dirt and
yeah,
feeling that. I think that I guess I do enjoy that kind of sensory experience. Things that I like having a fire. There's 1 million throw blankets in my house. I don't wear socks. I've got
yeah,
a lot of touch things.
yeah.
Um, my daughter is extremely sensory seeking in ways that
Mm,
I am sensory averse in terms of
that's so hard.
noises
Yeah.
and physical contact sometimes.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, she really likes to touch my face. And
Oh, I
no,
was just having a conversation with somebody else like last week for the podcast, and they also said like their kid likes to touch their face a lot. And I was like, that has to be really hard. Like,
because I don't
so
like it.
hard.
I don't like
Yeah.
it in general. I
Yeah.
don't want someone touching my face,
Yeah.
unless it's, you know what I mean, unless it's a
Yeah.
romantic situation. I don't want somebody
Yeah.
touching
And
my face. I really
well, and
don't.
even then it's like only in specific ways, right? Like
Yes.
I
Yes.
need to be my head needs to be there. Like my head
Right.
needs to be in the space that's okay.
Mhm.
Hmm.
I mean, and it is just playful. Sometimes she just wants to have her hands on my cheeks, and she likes to boot my nose.
Yeah.
And
We
it's
do.
something she'll get stuck in, you
Yeah,
know.
the repetitive
And we'll be like, over fall break, we were standing in lines at Carowinds. And so I'm already surrounded by people, which is
yeah,
not great for me.
overwhelmed. Yeah.
And she just really wants to boot my nose over and over again.
Yeah, I feel like I always try to turn those things, if I can, at least for my kids, like if I can turn it into a game,
Mm,
it it helps a little bit because then there's like an end point where I'm
right.
like, okay, the game's all done right now. And
Hmm.
also, usually it's like as they've gotten older, I've been able to talk to them more and be like, okay, is it that you want to touch me, or do you want me to boop your nose? Like,
Oh,
because,
yeah.
or do
Mhm.
you want me to tickle you? Because I don't want to be tickled, but do
Right.
you want to be tickled? If
Yes.
you want to be tickled, you just have to ask me. Like,
That's right. That's
all
right.
of those conversations about, like, are you doing this because you want it to happen?
Mhm.
Okay. And if you
And
don't, well, then I also don't want it to happen.
right. And frequently it is that she would be delighted for someone to be
Yeah.
doing these things to her. Or maybe she's tried to engage this way with one of her brothers and has been rejected. And
Yeah.
so she has come to me, and it is, we can turn it into a game
Yeah.
oftentimes. Um, and sometimes it just has to become,
Yep.
I've asked
Yeah.
you nicely. I have a boundary.
Yep.
We did this a few minutes, and I need it to be done.
Yeah. I mean, that's like one of the hardest parts about raising kids in general is teaching them boundaries, but
Mhm.
like also teaching ourselves boundaries because a lot of us didn't have those when we were kids. So we have to learn them, and then we have to like be able to help them learn them in healthy ways to be like, okay, I understand that you are seeking this thing right now. How can we meet that need in a way that isn't distressing to other people? Because yeah, like the sibling thing too comes up a lot in
Right.
my house, where it's
Right.
like, okay, you want to play with your sibling, but that doesn't mean they want to play with you, or
Mm-hmm.
they don't want to play in that way.
That way. Correct.
Yeah, because
Yes.
I also have a sensory seeker and a sensory avoider. And of course, the seeker wants to play, and it's like, but they don't want to play that way. We
Mm-hmm.
have to find a different way.
Mm-hmm. And do you find that they can have they reached a point where they can communicate about that? Is it something you have to kind of
It's
help
getting
them with?
there. I mean, we've done a lot of, you know, there are certain, I guess, like realms of parenting where people are like, you just have to let kids figure it out on their own.
Mm-hmm.
And to a certain extent, yes, they can do that at some point, but like I did a lot of intervening in their interactions for many years to like remind them because they get so caught up sometimes in what's happening right now. And it's like it's hard for them to pull back and say, oh, maybe they're not enjoying the thing that I am enjoying. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's like I've done a good bit of intervening to the point where now I can just be like, hey, is everybody having fun? Or is everybody like, let's listen to our bodies, let's listen to other people's body cues. And sometimes it only takes like a reminder these days.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but again, like all of that stuff is just like little pieces over and over and over again, and so much repetition.
Yes.
Like, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So much repetition. Um, something I think has been on my mind lately. I actually saw there's someone I follow on TikTok who is adult diagnosed
Hmm.
autistic, and raising an autistic child, similar to my story. That's kind of how it all kind of became clear to him, and talked about the real misconception that I think is really common, that autistic people are unemotional,
Oh my God, no.
somehow under emotional, or lack
Yeah.
of understanding of emotion.
Yeah.
Um, it was something I had to walk my mom through because she was kind of resistant to the idea that my oldest is autistic. 'Cause she said, but she's
Yeah.
so caring,
Yeah.
she's so invested in people. And I said, well, that's, for some reason that's been put out there as this idea.
It's because when we hear stories about autistic people, so often we hear them from the perspective of neurotypical people. So instead of hearing it from the inside out, we just hear it from the outside in, and that's never a full story. Like it's asking someone who isn't directly affected by it personally to explain what's going on in someone else's brain. And that doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make any sense, particularly when you're talking about a population who, from the word go,
Hmm.
has been misunderstood, has been trying to fit into a world they don't totally understand, and is therefore understandably not expressing emotions the way a neurotypical person would, you know?
Yeah, I mean, so a lot of times, like when we express emotions, especially as like a child, we might express those in ways that other people find unacceptable. And so if we are made to push those down and down and down, then I mean, that's traumatic. And so the way that humans deal with trauma is like a whole thing. And I there's I can't remember who the quote is by, but like it's basically that you have never met an untraumatized autistic adult. Like you have never met, because just the fact that we have to live in this world that is very much not built for us is traumatic. And
Mhm.
just to be able to function, it's some kind of trauma, and we can work through that, and we can find ways to like assert more of ourselves into society, but we're also being asked as the people with disabilities to do that work. Like,
Right. Right. Oh yeah. I mean, I was just thinking while you were talking about it, it is just reminds me of in my childhood. Um, I the way I express emotion is tears. Any
yep.
of the emotions. Okay. Happy tears, sad
Hmm.
tears, frustrated tears, angry tears. It's tears. Okay. So as a child, I cried all the time.
Yeah.
All the time. And uh let me be clear, I don't hold any resentments against my parents. They were in no way abusive, but they had no
Yeah,
idea how to
exactly.
navigate this.
Like
And
there was not information. There was no idea of what to do.
they were trying to um you probably have heard this phrase before that you don't prepare the road for your child, you prepare your child for the road, right?
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and they were trying to prepare me for the world, and the
Yeah.
world is difficult and you can't just cry all the time. People will think it's weird. You have to just stop
Yeah.
it. You have to just stop it. um
And
and
that's so hard when
it
you're a child and you don't, like, you're like, well, what else do I do?
Mhm.
And they don't give you those answers. They just tell you to
No.
stop.
Right, they just tell you to stop, and also not just what else do I do, because I don't even have that framework. Oh, well, what's a
Yeah.
better way to release this emotion?
Yeah.
um so it's what how do I stop? I don't
Yeah.
even know how not to do this, much less how, like, what would be a better thing to do. I don't know how to stop. And I did have a conversation with my mom about it as an adult. And she said just what I already explained, that, we just thought that,
Yeah.
it'd be better off for you in the long run if you learn just to not cry
Yeah.
all the time. And I said, well, Mom, I didn't learn to not cry all the time until I was 37. What you were doing didn't get me there,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. It's that I can look back and I can see the ways that my parents or other adults in my life wanted to help and very much did the opposite. But out like at the same time, I can't say what they could have done
Mhm.
either. Like
Right.
unless like so much of my work revolves around completely changing our perspective
Mhm.
to the extent that like no, not everybody is ready to do that. Not everybody is able to do that. But
Mhm.
we, because of the way that neurodivergent people exist in the world, we basically have to say like, which parts of society am I able to interact with, and which parts do I just have to accept never being able to fit in with?
Mhm. Mhm.
Because if I try, it might kill me.
Right. Right. It's so interesting what you said about your parents and how you can see places where maybe they didn't do, I guess, the right thing for you, but
Yeah,
you can tell them what to do either, right?
I don't
Um,
know.
and so that's like what we're living through right now,
Yep.
right? Like I'm taking what I experienced and I am
Yeah.
taking a different approach with my
Hmm.
children, all three of them, but in particular with my oldest. And it's very trial and error. It's very learn as we go. It's very just what you were saying, like where is a safe space and where is not?
Hmm. Yeah,
Where
and we remove ourselves from a lot of things that might be fun or might be good for us because we can't exist in that space or with that group of people because we just know ourselves. And that's hard. That's still really hard and sad. Like when we're like, I have to choose not to participate because I know that the cost will not be worth the possible benefit.
right, right. And then I think we've also had at least one experience where a couple really, where we've been rejected
Yeah.
in spaces that we thought were going to be fine, where I didn't even recognize that it wasn't
Yeah.
working. And then we've been asked to leave.
Ugh, that's that's just like incredibly hard and makes me want to scream at people. And like that's some childhood shit right there. Like that's
Yeah,
some deep childhood wounds that you want to prevent for your kids, but also like you can't prevent them all the time.
right. And where is the line? Like, where am I, trying to make sure we are in safe spaces and doing the best
Yeah.
thing for them? And where am I going to end up holding them back because I've drawn a line that I shouldn't have?
Yeah, I'm like just now at the point where I can be like, okay, I'm gonna let the reins loose a little bit and
Mhm.
let you try.
Mhm.
And it's like I think it's gonna be okay as long as they like we've worked on foundation, we've worked on saying you are always allowed to opt out. You are always allowed to like say this isn't working anymore. You can change your mind halfway through. You can because sometimes we don't know. Like we have to try, but
Right.
that doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to work and it's okay if it doesn't work. It's okay if that's not the space for us. The point is that we tried.
Right. And I think that my daughter handles failures a lot better than I did.
Yeah,
Um,
because it was the end of the world, right?
oh
If
my
we
gosh.
failed.
Oh, end of the world. It was the end of the world. It was horrifying. It was, I mean, you just said end of the world, but it was very final.
Yeah,
I had that way of thinking for a long time. I think that in some ways that's a lot of people, not necessarily just autistic people, but that if I if I fail at this as a 13-year-old, then
yeah,
nothing's ever going to happen.
yeah.
It's the end of all of it. My daughter dances. She
Hmm.
has been training at this dance studio for several years now, and it has gone by and large very well. Um, Particularly because she does know some people there. We have some family members who are involved at the same place, either as students or teachers, and she really has kind of blossomed. At first it seemed like this is just a hobby. It's a way for her to move her body. It's
Yeah,
not something we're going to excel at, and that's fine. But she really has, in the last year, she seems to be doing really well. And so now here's the thought, like, do we put it out there to actually like audition for a place in their company? Um,
yeah,
and I don't know if I'm more worried that she won't get a spot and feel heartbroken, or that she will and that she'll end up in a social environment that's a nightmare for her.
yeah.
Yeah.
I remember several things as a kid that I ended up not doing because even though I enjoyed the activity, I did not enjoy the people, and the social part was so hard. Dance was one of those. Like I
Mhm.
really loved dance. I loved tap and jazz. I didn't really like ballet personally. Like
That's what she does. She has put ballet down, but she does tap and jazz. Yeah.
I loved tap and jazz, but the kids, it was also at that age where I know my oldest is sort of in that tween, almost preteen era. So it's social stuff is getting even harder. And
Mhm.
it's just, you just want to like wrap them in bubble wrap
Yeah.
and protect them.
Yeah.
And it's just so hard to be like, okay, the only way that you learn is by doing.
Yeah.
And so we're going to let you try.
We're gonna try. Oh yeah, absolutely. It's like there is a part of me, a large part of me, and she is in public school right now, which um, right now is good.
Yeah.
We are still considering homeschooling. We're gonna kind of see how this year goes. But there is a large part of me that wants to say, okay, we're going to homeschool. We're going to take lots of trips. We're going
Yeah.
to spend a lot of time on this beautiful property we have and invite people we know who are safe over and,
Hmm.
you know, just keep our circle and our world as small as possible. But
Yeah.
that we get back to that thing I mentioned earlier. It's like, but where am I holding them back? You know,
Yeah.
where
It's
am
like
I
a
clipping their
constant,
wings? You know?
yes. It's just a constant like checking in process, right? Of having to say, okay, we haven't tried in a while, so where can we try now?
Mhm.
And are we ready to try again? Are we ready to do something again? And then
It's
being willing to.
right, right. It's been tricky since moving to this public school, which I was going to talk a little bit about that journey.
Yeah.
Uh she, you know, had been at a very small private school, which she enjoyed. And even though they knew all her diagnoses when we started there and said that they were
Yeah.
ready and willing and excited about working with us, they pulled us in the office halfway through the year last year and said that we needed to find somewhere else. And it was truly heartbreaking.
Yeah.
It was a very dark moment for me. You know, they'd asked me to come in and meet with them, and there's these three women there to sit me down and explain this to me. And as soon as it became clear where they were going, I had to get up and walk out. Again, the tears, you know, that's how I
Yeah.
respond. I was angry and heartbroken,
Yeah.
all the things. Um, that was really hard because she really loved that school in a lot of ways, and she felt
Yeah.
very safe there. It was very small. Um, the kids were kind to her. All the teachers knew her. Um, she is, you know, such a lovely spirit, and she has a lot of trouble relating to kids her own age.
Yeah.
She does fine with adults. She does fine with younger children. Kids her own age
Yep.
is a real struggle.
Yep.
And I realized my plan at first, and they were fine with this, is that we were going to finish the school year there, not to disrupt her year. And since we had just moved, but it was actually well timed. There's a very small public elementary school that we're zoned for. It's a great school in a county that has a lot of resources. Um, and I found out that I called to try and kind of get started on the process. And I found out that they can't do what they need to do to start an IEP until she's actually registered as a student there. So if I had not registered her until August,
Yeah.
the IEP wouldn't have started until sometime later in the fall. And so we
Yeah.
did end up moving mid-year. And I think as far as her academic growth, it's been a positive thing. Um,
Yeah.
but it has presented a lot of challenges for us,
Yeah.
mentally, emotionally, socially. You know, she got really distressed when she was in first grade at a different private school.
Hmm.
She had some really difficult experiences with bullying.
Yep.
And that was a large part of our move. I felt like she wasn't being protected there, and that she also they weren't offering any accommodations really for her
Yep.
learning needs. Um, and uh, and that quickly came up at the new school that there was somebody bullying her. And my immediate thought was that this was a neurotypical kid who was picking on her because she was different. It's just
Yeah.
the assumption I made. Um,
Yeah.
and when I explored it, they were not only very supportive and really wanting to address it and talk with us and have an open dialogue, but it was actually um, a child that was getting all the same resources that she was getting. And I think part of the conflict was just that they were together a lot, and he
Yeah.
had his own stuff going
Yep.
on, right?
Right? That's the part. That's one of the things that I feel like we don't talk about enough is it's we often have the idea because I make the same assumptions sometimes when I automatically and then I have to step back and like say, okay, what is actually happening?
Mhm.
Who are the people that are actually involved? Because so often it could be a kid who either is in a similar like situation, but also maybe a kid who needs the resources and doesn't have the resources.
Right, right.
And that peer pressure from other people is just as effect like affects the other kid just as much, and sometimes that just trickles down onto our kids. And
Right.
and vice versa. Like, I'm not going to say that my kids are perfect. Like, my kids have absolutely done the same thing every once in a while to other people. It's just kids. Like, they're still kids.
They're kids and they're trying to figure out how all this works. And there is this kind of social hierarchy that starts emerging. She's in the fourth grade, I think around
Hmm.
that time is when it really
Yep.
starts getting kind of, there are popular kids, there are athletic kids, it all kind of starts getting fleshed out around that age. And it's hard on days. She does have a couple of little friends at school, but again, they're just kids. And there's days that she
Yep.
says, that they didn't play with me yesterday, and I was alone at recess, and um, it's so hard for me. And
I know.
obviously, it's hard for her. I don't mean to say like, oh, like it's about
Yeah.
me, but it's I don't.
It brings up
I think it is
all
harder for me
it
because.
brings up all of the stuff from childhood that
Mhm,
you didn't have anybody there for.
mhm, right. And I don't know what to do,
I
right?
know.
I can't fix it, you
Yeah.
know. Um, and I know part of it is just going to turn back around. Like she might get in the car today and say that
Yeah.
she had the best day ever.
Exactly. We do a lot of redirection, a lot of like, I'm never going to say that you didn't have a bad experience, and I'm going to hold space for that. But we have to be really careful about how much time we spend on it,
Mhm,
because we will just get in thought loops and ruminate, and then the rest of the day really is going to get ruined.
mhm,
So, like, I do a lot of, what was the good thing? Like, what can we find that was the good thing today? Even if it was lunch, even if it was like, I don't know, you got a couple minutes of quiet in the bathroom or something.
right.
What is the one good thing that we can latch onto? And then what are some good things that we can focus on that we
Mhm.
will do in the future?
Good things that we have moving forward. I think one of
Hmm.
the best pieces of advice I've gotten recently, not that it was personal advice, something that I read, Becky Kennedy, I don't know if you're familiar with her work. She just
Mm-mm.
does a lot of parenting and child stuff. It's not specific to neurodivergent children, but it is just the current research. It is just the newer understanding, or a real understanding of like these aren't miniature adults, right?
No,
They
yeah,
need to be it's not
they're
this
growing.
old concept of children should be seen and not heard. It's not what we're going for. We're going for something more open, more supportive.
Yeah,
And she talks about that when something is wrong, when our kids have a hard experience, that I know for me, for a lot of people, what we want to do is just immediately make them happy.
yeah.
Want to fix it.
We want to fix it.
To, if it's either we can actually fix the problem or if
Yeah.
we can just, go to Target and pick out a new toy,
Yeah,
let's just, bring some joy into this. And she said that, at the end of the day, that can be crippling for our kids.
yeah,
We've got to let them experience difficulties and just make sure
yeah.
that they know that we're there, to
Yeah, know that but we have to believe for them that they can get through it.
Mhm.
Like, sometimes we just have to be present, which is the case with adults too, right? Like, sometimes we just have to believe for someone else that they can get through this thing that they're going through, and just be present without like trying to fix it, because I want to fix adults too sometimes, and
Oh my gosh.
it doesn't, like, that doesn't actually help. It's just like, now I've made it my problem when I could just
Mhm.
be present for their problems.
Mhm. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, shoot. And I've already told you, like I'm a mental health counselor. Like I absolutely want to fix people,
Yeah.
and I'm like, I have the answers, you know.
I have some answers. I have some. But like, but are those the answers that this person needs at this moment? I don't know.
No, right. Maybe not. Maybe not. But in that moment, I think I do,
Yeah.
I'll get in that
Oh yeah.
space. Um, but it's, different in terms of raising these kids. I don't get into that space if I have the answers. I get full of self-doubt.
Yes.
What
And I
do
think
I
that's
do
just,
next?
I mean, that's just part of parenting in general, is just like we don't have the answers and it's probably still going to be okay. Like
Hmm.
it's, even though I try to remind myself a lot of times that even when things that my kids are going through bring up that old trauma from my own childhood, I am not them. They have me. They have a person who is aware and who is trying and who is like making accommodations that I never got. And just being aware that they have struggles, that they have the struggles that they do, is, I have to believe that that makes an impact in their future.
Hmm. Oh, I absolutely believe that. I
Yeah.
absolutely believe just that emotional validation
Yeah.
that we did not receive as children, you
Just,
know?
yeah, just knowing that your experience is true
Hmm.
is enormous.
Hmm. I think something that I know is true for me is that nobody can gaslight me like I can gaslight myself. And I
Yeah.
think that it goes back to that,
Yeah.
having doubted my own truth and my own experience from such a young age.
Hmm.
Having, the things I did for myself that helped me been questioned, if not ridiculed, from such a young age,
Yeah.
learning to believe in yourself, trust in yourself, and just knowing that you have someone completely safe to turn to,
Yeah,
right?
knowing that no matter what a lot of times, like for many neurodivergent people, we have two things going on, right? Like we know logically that what we are feeling, especially when it comes to like, say, pathological demand avoidance or rejection sensitivity dysphoria, like we can know that this is a feeling that isn't true. Like it
Mhm.
is a feeling that is passing through us and it's just how our body and brain are processing. But that doesn't mean people actually hate us. That doesn't mean people actually want to control us, but it is a feeling and we can like recognize the feeling, and also like being able to voice that to a safe person who isn't trying to fix it, who isn't trying to tell us that's not true, because it feels true. Like it
Mhm.
feels true in that moment. It's so important to like validate that feeling, and after we have made space for it, to accept that, okay, now what are we going to do? Like, yes, we recognize we have the feeling. Let's find the way that we can move forward, even though, like, even while acknowledging that feeling. We're going to put that over here for a minute, and then we're going to move forward knowing the things that we know logically. Does
Mhm.
that make sense?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I can actually think of a really relevant example with my daughter that it happens. I don't know how often, but it's certainly happened a number of times. She will, and it will be just when nothing is going on. And I can look back and realize it's maybe been at a time where she has sought connection and I've been busy or tired or something. And she will just say kind of out of nowhere, I don't think anyone loves me. I mean, she'll
Yeah.
verbalize that.
We have that
Nobody,
too.
nobody loves me.
Yep.
And she really means it, you
Yeah.
know? I think
In that
that
moment, it is true.
it is real for her. And I think that when I look back to my own childhood, and again, I mean, my parents are wonderful people, but they just were
Yeah.
no idea what was going
People.
on. It probably would have maybe the first time they would have had a gentle response or just been surprised, but it would have become either something they turned into a joke maybe, or something that
Yeah.
they eventually got angry about,
Yeah.
and said, how
Because
could you
when,
say that? How could you
yeah,
say that when this, and this? Um, and instead, I just always, I start by asking her questions, what
yep,
makes you feel that way? You know, what has happened today or what's happened this
yeah,
week that makes you feel that way? And that opening that conversation allows us to get to some other things, talking about other things that happened in the day. And maybe
yep,
she'll mention something that I did for her as a part of that. And I'll say, so why do you think I did that for you? And she'll say, is it because you love me?
yeah.
Say, yeah.
Sometimes we just need help remembering.
Hmm.
Like, I
Yeah.
think even as adults, we can get in that space of like, nobody loves me, everything is
Yeah.
terrible,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
everybody hates me.
Yeah.
And then, like,
I can't do
because we're
anything right
adults,
ever.
because we're adults and we have more resources and tools, we can pull back and say, okay, we're being ridiculous.
Hmm. Hmm.
But
Yeah.
it's okay
I
that we
will,
feel like that.
yeah, I'll say, I hope you don't mind me bringing this topic in, but for me, as someone who's in long-term recovery from a substance use
Hmm.
disorder, I find it remarkable the tools I learned there that I
Yeah.
can use here. The
Oh, yeah.
overlap is really interesting.
It really is. Yeah, I tell a lot of people, I'm like, if I could just give everybody in recovery a test to see how many of us are
Yeah.
neurodivergent, like I feel like the numbers would be pretty high.
Oh, it would be crazy,
Like
and not
ridiculous.
that everyone who experiences addiction is autistic
No,
necessarily, but
but
even
there's just a lot of us.
ADHD, dyslexic,
Yes.
um, just a lot of other
Yeah.
neurodiverse things definitely
Hmm.
going on there. Yeah, it's wild, and that tool in particular is something that was helpful for me when I was
Yeah.
getting sober because I was so full of all that negative self-talk and self-hatred.
Because you had
Really.
been told through your childhood, through your adulthood, like that what you were was wrong.
Hmm.
What you were wasn't, it wasn't okay to be like that out in the world. It was okay to be like that in private, maybe, but it wasn't okay to be like that out in the world. And aren't those all the themes of being an addict, being like in recovery? You have to learn how to like how to accept yourself again and forgive yourself, and then, make amends with other people for whatever harm you caused in your own pain.
Right. And I think it was also not that it was unacceptable to be myself in the world, but that who I was not sufficient for making it in this world.
Yeah.
That to me was the stronger, more prevailing message that I was not good enough in some way, not
Yeah.
good enough to be successful in a workplace, to maintain a healthy relationship, like that I
Yep.
was just I don't know, somebody that needed to be taken care of, someone who was
Yeah.
a mess, right?
Oh my God. The coming back to ourselves after like recovery. And I think that people who have not specifically had problems with addiction can also kind of relate when they are coming out of burnout or
Mhm.
coming out of a severe mental health crisis, where you have where like you're learning how capable you are once you have the supports and the accommodations and the accessible like things that you need. You are very capable. But when you don't have those, you were the person, like I was the person that needed to be saved all of the time. And I hated it. Like I hated being saved. I didn't want to feel like that. I didn't want to be the person who was always like incapable of existing.
Right,
Um,
right.
but you get in that mindset when you don't receive the supports and the accommodations that you need all the time, because you're stuck in your own head. You don't know what else to ask for.
Right. You don't know what to ask for. And I thought this was interesting because he posted about it recently, and it's coming to mind again now. Not only are we not sure what to ask for, but oftentimes things that maybe we had just happened to find on our own that helped us,
Yeah.
or we knew that we needed in some way, were frowned upon,
Yeah. They
you
were not
know?
socially normal. Like
Mhm.
they weren't things that everybody used. Like people have an opinion about goddamn everything.
Yeah.
Like I remember a conversation many years ago about people criticizing people who used pre-chopped vegetables and fruits from the grocery aisles. And it's like, have you A, why do you care so much?
Right. Right.
B, have you
Get a
never met
hobby.
a person with like rheumatoid arthritis or an elderly person who cannot chop those fruits and vegetables? And they're like, oh, well, it's okay for them. I'm like, well, how do you know? How do you
Right.
know that person doesn't need it?
Well, maybe why is it not okay for somebody else? Why is it not okay for a mom who's got small children and doesn't want them grabbing at sharp knives, or somebody who's just in
Anything.
a hurry? Like, well, why?
Yeah.
Yeah, who are
Why
we?
is
Have opinions on everything.
so many things?
I think
Uh,
one of the things that's been the best for me, and I know this is a lot of what you like to put out there about people learning to manage their energy.
yeah.
Um, is allowing myself rest.
Oh my goodness.
You
That
know,
is a whole journey.
oh gosh, we live in such a hustle culture, right? And you'll even hear people, successful people, talking about how they only sleep 4 hours a night. And
As though it's a badge of honor.
yeah, yeah. And I am someone who I believe, from what I've learned about myself, has a brain that needs at least 9 hours of quality sleep a night.
Same. Like I feel this guilt about needing as much sleep as I do, but if I don't, I can function without
But it's
it, but
not
that
great.
no, I'm not going to be as patient, I'm not going to be as
Mm-mm.
calm, I'm not going to be like my brain just needs more downtime.
Yes. My brain needs more downtime. And there is neuroscience to back us up. That's not just our lived experience. You know, people who have experienced chronic or clinical depression need more sleep. You know, people whose brains are wired differently, as ours are, they just require more rest than some other brains do.
Yep.
And not even just sleep at night, but also rest during the day, you know,
Yeah,
allowing
that's a huge
myself
one.
to, you know, on some days when all of my children are at school, to not do a whole lot for 4 hours.
Yeah.
And people look down on that. They do.
Mhm. They absolutely do. Like, I think that's why discussions like this are so important because so many of these things we will do in the quiet of our own homes because we feel like we are going to be judged because we might be if we talk about them in public. But making that normal, making that like you are not the only person that does that. Like,
Mhm,
I talk with other neurodivergent people all the time about it is ridiculous how much rest we need. Like
mhm.
we are geniuses at the things that we are good at. But to do that, we need so much rest. Like I have to sit myself down and be like, okay, I just need to not do anything, even if I want to.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I have
It's
to tell myself no
infuriating.
sometimes. Like, no, you need to sit.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's just these little things like that that it takes some of that, like we were talking about earlier, getting into that place of self-love after years
Hmm.
of feeling like you were just an alien on this planet,
Yep.
which maybe we are, that's different.
Yeah.
And caring about yourself enough to do these things, even if other people aren't going to like it.
It's also, yeah, it's prioritizing what you know you need instead of what benefits capitalism, like what
Yeah.
benefits other
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
It's not beneficial to capitalism that most neurodivergent people are not made very well for capitalism.
And
We
a
just,
lot of people growing up in this culture really think that, like, if you didn't contribute to the gross national
yeah,
product today, then what is your value? Then
yep,
why are you here? That your
because
value
you're a
is
human
directly
being.
tied to your productivity. And getting to a place where you feel certain enough of yourself to be open about that. I mean, for me,
Yeah,
that's been a whole journey.
yeah, yeah. You have to be solid in your own self-knowledge to be able to share that confidently. And building that foundation it's so hard and it takes so much just sort of faith, like jumping out and trusting that even though everybody else is telling you different things, if there is a thing that's working for you, you have to keep trusting it.
Mhm.
And you trust that you will figure it out. Like it might not make sense at first, but you will figure it out. I mean, I mean, so I took my kids out of public school like a couple of years ago, and we had been in and out and in and out because of the pandemic and like other things. And I'd always thought about homeschooling, but I took them out because it wasn't sustainable any longer. I was up there every other day having a conversation with the same people over and over again
Mhm.
and explaining that, the things that my kids are going through are not choices that they are making necessarily. They are parts of who they are. And the ways that you need to help them are not yelling at them, are not punishing them, are not like it was very difficult. But so it made more sense to pull them out and to homeschool them. But homeschool is another area where you're like, people do not agree with homeschooling all of the time.
Yeah, people have
Um,
strong opinions about that too.
they have so many opinions.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I'm the kind of person where I'm like, if you're doing something that doesn't hurt anybody else, I don't care. Like,
Yeah.
make the choices you make. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter. If
Yeah.
it doesn't hurt another person, do whatever you want to do.
Right. It's not my concern.
But other people have this need to like assert themselves into your life and they want you to do things because it makes them uncomfortable sometimes. The way
Hmm.
that we exist in the world can make other people uncomfortable because it makes them question, why is it so easy for you? Or why do you get to do that? And it's like, you can too, but then you have to be uncomfortable and make that choice.
Right. I think it does. I think a lot of times these things challenge people in places that they don't want to look,
Yeah,
right? Um, I've talked to other mothers at this school, which, like I said, we're gonna try this full school year and see how that
yeah,
goes. But um, the whole way our education system in this country is structured is just absurd. It asks way too much of children and families.
yeah.
7 hours a day, 5 days a week for a 5 and
From,
year
yeah,
olds?
from
That's
like so
wild.
young. There's so little.
Like, whoever thought this was a good idea, and I can't believe we're all doing it, is how
Yeah,
I've started to feel about it, to be honest, you know?
yep. I mean, even my kids will tell you, like, we do a co-op 2 times a week for 4 hours each day, like that we do it. And that is plenty. Like, that is now that they've had a chance to come back from the public school was traumatic. It was
Mm,
traumatic for them. Just the energy, like the space, even like setting aside any of the specific struggles with teachers, because we did have a couple of really horrifically bad teachers,
mm,
behavior wise, like, and punishment wise. But the way that the school system is set up, just putting that many kids in one space is so hard on your nervous system.
Yeah.
Like for very sensitive children, it's very difficult. It's so loud and there's just so much going on all of the time.
Yeah. It's a lot of energy. It's a
Yeah.
lot of energy and a lot of different kinds of energy that they're
Yep.
not necessarily used to, especially if they're living in a home where there is actually concerted effort made to keep positive and healthy energy,
Yeah.
and clearly not every child is coming from that kind of home, you know.
Yeah.
It's a lot on them. My youngest, who is, as far as I can tell, um, gonna be my child who does adapt to this world the best. He is,
Yeah.
he's just in kindergarten, but he's knocking it out of the park. He's never met a stranger. He's
I think that might also be third kid energy, honestly.
right.
My
Yeah.
third kid is like, he knows what he's about. He is very much a Taurus. He just wants to eat and sleep and snuggle.
Mm-hmm.
And then he goes and does stuff, and he's like, okay, like you go do what you're gonna do. I'm gonna do what I want to do.
Yeah. Well, that's yeah, this kid is very much the same way. And on top of that, I don't think he's going to need the academic accommodations that his siblings have
Yeah.
needed. And he he still like when he first started at full-time school, because he did stay. One of the things I really enjoyed about that very small private school was that they did have the option of a 4-day week and an 8 to 1 schedule. And that
Yeah.
is so much better suited to elementary age children. So when he moved from there to this, 8:30 to 3:30, 5 days a week, I mean, he would get home and just,
Hard. Collapse.
yeah, just
Yeah.
sleep. I mean, it's a lot. I'm exhausted. I'm not even there, you
I
know,
know.
I'm not even there. And I
The
just am drained.
the number of meltdowns we had specifically after school because my kids, so one of the reasons they struggled is because they are high maskers and they will hold it together as long as they can, and then at a certain point they reach the end of the rope.
Hmm.
And usually that would be at home where we would have, meltdowns that would last so long. And it was so hard on our own home too, because then I'm like, there is only so much you can do to mitigate that
Yeah.
when most of the trauma is happening, most of that stuff is happening in a place you don't have control over. You can do all the IEP meetings, you can do all of the 504 plans and talk to the teachers and talk to the staff, but it really just depends on how lucky you get with the people who are there.
Right. Right.
It's
That's it.
because the rules don't mean anything if the people aren't able to show up and do them.
Hmm. Hmm. That's right. And we've been that right there, what you're talking about is why we didn't start with public school.
Yeah.
We knew the county we lived in at the time did not have great
Yep.
resources. We had some friends who worked in the school system there who just said,
Yeah.
it's probably not the best fit, and been told more than once, like, oh, well, that, the next county over, if you could try that. And I had it in my head that and it was about that being able to control the space, that if I was at a private school and I really like knew the people and could talk
Yeah.
and it just didn't go that well.
Yeah.
And it was something I really didn't see coming. I think that's part of what's been so difficult about this journey is that I've been so surprised at the lack of knowledge, lack of compassion, lack of understanding that I encountered within schools.
Yep.
Um,
It's so hard.
yeah. And that's for both my kids, and really in particular, my middle child who not totally sure we did. I don't know where you stand on this stuff. I did have full psych evals done on my kids.
We're
Um,
working through the process. It's been a long list of paperwork that has eventually gotten done.
Right. And I understand people who don't want to do that, who are
Yeah.
kind of like, why do I need to spend the time and the money to um let some PhD tell me what I already know?
It is a very personal decision.
For
It's
sure.
neither good nor bad.
For me, I just thought that I could find the tools I needed
Yeah.
if I had some kind of structure here, and
Mhm.
also that I could get them connected with resources that are
Yeah.
only available if you have diagnoses, which
That
that's
is,
great that that's how it's set up, but
that's just how it
sometimes
is.
sometimes we just have to try and make ourselves into the shape of the world we live in.
Yep.
And so we did seek that out. And I went with my son, my middle child, thinking that we would just get a dyslexia diagnosis, pretty straightforward. Had a negative experience at what seemed like was going to be a great um,
Yeah.
school, where they said, yeah, he's not learning to read. He's just not, basically, they were like, he just doesn't pay attention. He's just got the attention span of a mosquito. And I think mosquito was the word he used. And I was like, that's not true. I know that's not
Yeah.
true. From like Carolyn, my older child, sorry, I didn't mean to say her name actually, but she yeah, attention span's a huge problem for her.
Hmm.
I can see that being a large portion of her problem in academics. This child, no way. He has these intricate projects he likes to do at home, and
Yeah.
he gets really focused on things. I know that part of all this, for a lot of neurodivergent people, we can hyper focus on certain things and then not be able to pay attention at all, but I just didn't seem right. And as we're uncovering it, it's like, well, he knows all the letters, but he doesn't know what sounds they make. He can't tie the sound to the image. I said, that's
Yeah.
not inattention.
No,
It's not inattention.
that's a learning disability.
Yes, like very clearly. And they were not hearing it. They were just like, you just need to be reading at home more. You really need to be working hard with him every night. I said, no, he needs a specialist. He
Yeah.
needs somebody who can help him draw these lines, can help him connect this stuff.
Make
And
those.
we did find a great specialist, a tutor to help him, and he's now in second grade with no accommodations and reads well, and it's fantastic. Um, but they were not only not listening to what I could see what was,
Yeah.
and it wasn't that they thought I was wrong, they were just not listening at all. And they even
Yeah.
finally said, because they were sick of hearing me, they said, well, if you're not going to do this stuff that we're saying you need to do, then he's just going to need to repeat kindergarten. I said, no, he's not. I bet he's not, because what I do know from my field is that all the current research in education says that that is not what we do. When a child is struggling with an
Yeah.
academic area, we don't repeat a grade. It's not what's best for them. Another year of the same thing is not going to help them. If it's
No.
a social issue, maybe another year with younger
Sure.
kids could be helpful, but like
Yeah.
that's not what we need. Um, and it's so that's just one example of
Yeah. It's
so
just
many that I've had.
the lack of care, the lack of, like you said, compassion, just like it's heartbreaking. And I mean, I'm very grateful that I was able to find a way to homeschool my kids, but I don't know what I'd be doing if I wasn't. It would just be repeated trauma. And I know that because
Mhm,
I it was breaking all of us to
mhm.
keep doing public school, especially in the school system that we are in. It's not an easy decision, and I don't think there's any right or wrong decision. It's just that we all do the best we can with what resources we have.
Right, right. Yeah, and it definitely varies, as we know, um, being neurodivergent isn't one thing, right? It
Yeah,
can mean so many different things. And for some kids, I think that this, I think for Carolyn, part of the reason that it seems to be working is that she doesn't have a lot of behavioral.
Yeah.
All of her stimming stuff is pretty, it's contained, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and especially in that environment, you know, she seems to keep to herself some. So I think the learning resources have been good for her, but then I also have to balance that with like, I wonder how good for her it is to feel so shut down so much of the day. You know,
Yeah. And
it's
I
hard.
think that's okay that it's like a moving target too. I think that at different points our kids might need different things
Hmm.
and that we just kind of adjust as we need to.
Hmm.
Um, I I've talked already with my oldest kid about like they don't really want to go to college, and that's fine.
That's
And like
fine.
if you don't want to, you don't have to. We will figure out what you do want to do and
Hmm.
get you the skills that you need to be able to, be a functional adult, because that's all we're really
Yeah.
going for. You
Yeah.
don't have to go to college to be a
College
functional
is
adult.
college is not for everyone.
It is
Absolutely.
I have my associates, but I could not at that time imagine going all the way through to get more than that, even though I wanted the knowledge. I
Hmm.
wanted to be able to learn, but the system itself and like the way that it's structured was not working for me.
Hmm.
So I became a pastry chef because it was a year program and it was accelerated. So it was perfect, honestly, for an ADHD autistic person who likes to hyperfocus on their
Yeah.
special interest.
Right.
I got
Right.
to just do that for a whole year with very few breaks, like maybe a week or two, like in the whole year was off. And and then I was done.
Yeah. Yeah. And see,
And I mean,
I have a master's degree because that was somewhere that I always excelled, you
yeah,
know, like academics worked for me,
yeah.
you know, to the point that sometimes I was like, I should have just stayed there. Like, why didn't I just like get a PhD and like teach? But that's because I'm an alcoholic and being on a college campus would have been really bad for me.
That too. I
It
mean,
was never going to work out.
I think also like the issues with academia itself and like the low pay for like the amount of
Oh
debt
yeah.
that you have to go into, like that's a whole thing. And
That's a whole separate thing. I did want to say one thing, if I can circle back real quick
yeah,
to the evaluation stuff. Because that was a whole journey for us as well. Because I got some diagnoses that I didn't agree with.
okay.
Um, and it's been interesting for me to parse out there what was stuff that maybe is accurate that just wasn't what I expected and not the way that I saw it. Um,
Hmm.
and the stuff that makes me want to like just start, you know, maybe go back to school and start doing research and trying to
Yeah,
explain to people that this isn't what you think it is.
yeah.
Because both of my kids, well, one of them got the diagnosis, one of them got a provisional diagnosis of ODD, which I don't know if you're
I
familiar,
hate that one.
but it's a
I
defiance
don't
disorder. Yeah.
Again, the way that they pathologize things that are only a problem for the person outside of who it's happening to, right?
Mhm.
That is
Mhm.
very much based on the outside perspective and not the internal perspective.
Right. Yeah. And it was so bizarre to me when they explained it to me, like why they'd landed on this diagnosis. With my daughter, it can be explained by I'm having a brain lapse right now, but you know what I'm talking about. The
Hmm. Oppositional defiant disorder,
right, no, but the it's a trait of autism that
pathological demand avoidance.
yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think that's what they were seeing and they were calling
Yeah.
it AD.
because it implies oppositional defiance disorder implies that they're doing it on purpose. Whereas even pathological demand avoidance, sometimes I feel is accurate internally. Like for myself, I feel that because it can feel pathological. But I also really appreciate the other definition that has come through in more recent years of persistent drive for autonomy, because that it's, I've said this before, but like pathological demand avoidance feels like the effect, and persistent drive for autonomy feels like the core, right? If I don't get if I don't get the autonomy, then it becomes a pathological avoidance.
Right, 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 right. And so that's what they were seeing. And even though they had just also given her a autism spectrum
Yeah.
disorder, they call it diagnosis, they didn't
Hmm.
link those two things. So even though they had the information, they were still like,
They're
oh,
not
I
like
don't think you
piecing
need to
it
look at the
together.
oppositional defiance disorder. And so crazy. And then they did give my son the same diagnosis, and I talked to them about what was going on, why they would have done that, and they kind of walked me through it. And I was like, it sounds like he just didn't like you.
That's so true though, because like if I don't like you, you're gonna know it because my face is just gonna show you.
And he was literally, they were asking him questions, and he was like, I don't know, what do you think? You know?
I kind of love us. Like I love autistic and ADHD people because we're so honest sometimes. And
Mm,
if you're gonna be a dick, like we're gonna tell you.
yeah,
We're
yeah.
not gonna just make it all okay and act like everything's
I
fine.
I am not gonna play nice with you. That's one of the things that I really has changed my life. Now I'm gonna be kind always, but that's for me.
Yes.
That's for
Yes.
me. I am not going to pretend you weren't being nasty. I'm not going to make believe that this was a good experience for anyone.
Exactly. Like we're not sparing feelings because you hurt me. That's
Mm-mm,
not what's happening.
mm-mm, mm-mm. It's been my one of my favorite parts of kind of really what has felt like stepping into my power in
Yeah.
this whole experience of parenting these kids and getting sober and all of that is just that I feel like I've just taken on in my life now as a role as an advocate,
Yeah.
that's for people with substance use disorders, for people who are neurodivergent, for my
Yep.
children, for myself. Like I'm just gonna, yeah.
I just want to gather everybody up and like all of my people, gather them up and give them a great big hug and like give them a pep talk to be like,
Yeah.
you're not broken. You're
Mm-mm.
just different.
You're not broken. This world is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I love this conversation and I wish we could
Me
talk
too.
for the rest of the day.
I absolutely could, but we've already gone over our
Yes.
hour. I don't know.
Yes. It's this was lovely. I don't think, I mean, if you want to mention any socials or any place that you want people to find you, you can, but you do not have to because I know you do private work
Right.
usually.
Yeah, I'm not real active in any of that now. I maybe I've kind of got some things in the works I might be changing, but for right now, no, yeah,
Yeah, that's totally fine.
private facility. But I loved this so much. I really enjoyed
Yeah,
this. It was great for me. It was great to be here. And um,
definitely.
I hope that if anybody gets even a little morsel of information they needed or just inspiration,
Yeah,
that they're not the only ones out there fighting the good fight.
definitely. I'm so glad that we got to talk and this
It
was lovely.
was.
We will catch.
This has been an episode of the Neurodivergent Parenting Podcast with Melissa Cox. We are part of the Neurodiversity Media Network. You can find the Neurodiversity Media Network on YouTube and anywhere that podcasts are. You can find Melissa Cox on Facebook at Melissa Cox, Blue Sky at melissa-cox.bsky.social, on TikTok and Instagram at living_with_disaster. And you can always catch us right here again for the next episode. Thanks for joining us.